Dr. Zara Kethvy stood at the observation deck of the massive research ship called the Eternal Light. She looked through the thick glass windows at the small blue planet below. This was her first time seeing Earth, the home world of the strange new species called humans. Zara belonged to a race called the Etherians. Her people were tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and large silver eyes. They had been traveling through space for thousands of years, meeting many different alien races. The Etherians were known for being very smart and calm. They never showed strong emotions or acted without thinking first. As the chief xenobiologist on this mission, Zara's job was to study humans and learn about their biology. The Etherian Council had sent this research team to Earth after receiving the first signals from human civilization. They wanted to know if humans could be useful allies or if they might be dangerous. Zara had spent many weeks reading reports about humans. The data showed that humans were a young species, only recently developing space travel. They seemed violent and emotional compared to other intelligent races the Etherians had met. Most Etherian scientists thought humans would be too primitive to be interesting. But Zara felt curious about these creatures. There was something different about the energy readings that came from human settlements. The bioscanners picked up patterns that didn't match any known species. Human brain activity showed unusual spikes of electrical energy. Their bodies produced chemicals in combinations that seemed random and chaotic. Dr. Kethvy called her assistant Vex. The first human subjects have arrived at the testing chamber. We can begin the observation protocols. Zara nodded and walked toward the laboratory section of the ship. She had requested permission to observe living humans up close. The Etherian diplomats had made contact with human governments and arranged for a small group of volunteers to visit their ship. These humans would undergo basic medical scans so the Etherians could learn about human biology. The testing chamber was a large white room with one-way viewing windows. Zara took her position at the main observation station. Banks of computers and monitoring equipment surrounded her workspace. She activated the bioscanners and adjusted the settings to focus on the human subjects. "Send in the first human," Zara said through the communication system. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. A human male walked into the room. He appeared to be in his middle years of life, with dark hair and brown eyes. He wore simple blue clothing that covered most of his body. The human looked around the chamber with obvious curiosity and perhaps some nervousness. Zara began her standard observation routine. She recorded the human's height, weight, and basic body structure. The scanners measured his heart rate, brain activity, and body temperature. Everything seemed normal according to her research data. But then something unexpected happened. As Zara watched the human through her equipment, she felt a strange sensation in her chest. It was like a warm feeling spreading through her body. Her heart began beating faster than normal. Her skin felt hot and her breathing became deeper. These sensations were completely unknown to Zara. Etherians had evolved beyond most physical reactions centuries ago. Their bodies were perfectly controlled by their minds. They didn't experience things like rapid heartbeat or warm feelings without a clear biological reason. Zara looked at her medical sensors to see if she was sick. All readings showed normal health, but the strange feelings continued to grow stronger as she watched the human subject. The human was now following the test procedures, walking around the chamber and performing simple physical tasks. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed natural and easy. His facial expressions changed frequently, showing different emotions as he reacted to the testing environment. Zara found herself focusing more and more on these expressions. When the human smiled, she felt a pleasant sensation in her stomach. When he showed concentration while solving a puzzle, she noticed the way his forehead wrinkled slightly. When he laughed at something her assistant said through the speakers, Zara felt her own mouth wanting to curve upward in response. "Dr. Kethvy," Vex said from beside her, "your bio readings are showing unusual patterns. Are you experiencing any health problems?" Zara looked at her own monitoring display in shock. Her heart rate had increased by 30%. Her brain activity showed spikes in areas that had been dormant for her entire life. Her body temperature had risen, and her skin was producing moisture in a way that Etherians hadn't done for generations. I'm not sure," Zara said. "Continue monitoring the human subject. I need to run some tests on myself." She moved to a secondary station and began scanning her own biology. The results made no sense. Ancient genetic sequences that had been turned off in her DNA for thousands of years were suddenly becoming active. Parts of her brain that scientists thought were useless leftovers from evolution were lighting up with electrical activity. Of these changes seemed to be connected to her observation of the human. Subject Zara looked back at the testing chamber. The human was now resting, sitting in a chair and drinking water. Even in this simple activity, there was something about him that continued to trigger these strange responses in her body. She realized that she wanted to keep looking at him. Not for scientific reasons, but because watching him created pleasant feelings that she had never experienced before. This desire was completely against her training and her species' normal behavior. "Vex," she said quietly, "have you ever heard of an Etherian having involuntary biological responses to observing another species?" Her assistant checked his databases. "No, Dr. Kethvi. Our people have maintained complete biological control for over 2,000 years. Physical responses are always voluntary and purposeful." Zara nodded, but she knew something unprecedented was happening to her. As she continued to watch the human subject, the strange new sensations grew stronger instead of fading away. Her scientific mind wanted to understand what was causing this reaction, but another part of her consciousness simply wanted to experience more of these feelings. She scheduled additional observation sessions for the following days. She told herself it was for research purposes, but deep down, she knew the truth. Something about humans was awakening parts of her biology that her species had forgotten existed. The first human subject completed his tests and left the chamber. As soon as he was gone, Zara felt the pleasant sensations begin to fade. Her heart rate started returning to normal, and her brain activity calmed down, but she found herself already looking forward to tomorrow's sessions with a sense of anticipation that was completely foreign to her orderly Etherian mind. As she filed her daily reports that evening, Zara decided not to mention the unusual biological responses she had experienced. She needed to understand what was happening before she reported it to her superiors. But she had a growing suspicion that her encounter with humans was going to change everything. She thought she knew about her own species and their carefully controlled evolution. The next morning, Dr. Zara Kethvi arrived at her laboratory earlier than usual. She had spent the night running private medical scans on herself, trying to understand the strange biological changes she experienced while observing the human subject. The results troubled her deeply. Not only were the dormant genetic sequences still active, but they seemed to be growing stronger. Areas of her brain that her people considered evolutionary dead ends were now functioning at levels comparable to a primitive species. Zara had secretly accessed the Etherian genetic archives during the night. What she discovered shocked her. The activated sequences in her DNA matched patterns from her species' distant past, from a time before they had achieved perfect biological control. These were genes that controlled emotions, physical attraction, and instinctive responses that modern Etherians no longer experienced. "Good morning, Dr. Kethvi." Vex greeted her as he entered the laboratory. "I have prepared 3 new human subjects for today's observations. The diversity should provide excellent comparative data." Zara nodded, though she felt nervous in a way that was completely unfamiliar. She wondered if the same strange reactions would happen with different humans, or if yesterday's experience was somehow unique to that particular individual. "Begin with Subject 2, she instructed, taking her position at the observation station. The chamber doors opened and a human female entered. She had long red hair and green eyes, and moved with confident, purposeful steps. Like the previous subject, she appeared curious about her surroundings but not frightened. As soon as Zara began observing this new human, the biological responses returned immediately. Her heart rate increased, her skin temperature rose, and those ancient brain centers began firing with electrical activity. But this time, the sensations felt different from yesterday. While observing the male human had produced feelings of warmth and pleasant attraction, watching the female human created different but equally intense responses. Zara found herself admiring the human's graceful movements and the way her hair caught the laboratory lighting. When the human female smiled, Zara felt a different kind of pleasant sensation, one that seemed to combine appreciation and a desire for social connection. "Dr. Kethvi," Vex said with concern, "your biological readings are even more elevated than yesterday." I recommend stopping the observation and seeking medical attention." "No," Zara replied quickly. "Continue the testing. I need more data." She was becoming fascinated by the variety of responses the humans triggered in her system. It was as if each human individual activated slightly different combinations of her newly awakened genetic sequences. The human female completed her tests and left. Zara immediately requested the third subject. This time, a younger human male entered the chamber. He had light brown hair and appeared to be in the early adult phase of human development. His movements were more energetic than the previous subjects, and he showed obvious excitement about being on an alien spacecraft. Again, Zara experienced the now familiar biological changes, but with new variations. This human's youthful energy seemed to activate protective instincts in her brain that she didn't know existed. She found herself concerned about his well-being and wanting to ensure he felt comfortable during the testing procedures. "This is unprecedented," Zara whispered to herself as she watched her bio-readings climb to new levels. She began to form a theory about what was happening. Human beings were somehow triggering ancient genetic programs that had been dormant in Etherian DNA for millennia. But why? What was special about humans that could cause such a dramatic biological response? Zara spent the rest of the day analyzing the bioscans she had taken of the human subjects. She compared their genetic patterns, electromagnetic signatures, and biochemical compositions to data from other species the Etherians had encountered. The answer, when she found it, was startling. Humans possessed a unique combination of genetic diversity and electromagnetic field patterns that didn't exist in any other known intelligent species. Their DNA showed evidence of recent rapid evolution, with active genetic sequences that most species had either lost or carefully controlled. More importantly, humans produced a complex mixture of chemical signals that her instruments could barely detect. These pheromones and bioelectric fields seemed to be designed by evolution to trigger responses in other species' dormant genetic programs. It was as if humans were natural catalysts for awakening suppressed biological functions in other life forms. Zara realized that her people's evolution toward perfect biological control might have been a mistake. In eliminating their emotional and instinctive responses, the Etherians had cut themselves off from important biological functions that humans still possessed. The thought was revolutionary and dangerous. Etherian society was built on the principle that their controlled evolution represented the pinnacle of intelligent development. To suggest that a primitive species like humans might possess something valuable that Etherians had lost would be considered heretical. But Zara couldn't deny the evidence of her own biological responses. That evening, she made a decision that went against all her training. Instead of filing a standard scientific report, she requested a private meeting with Commander Thale, the leader of their research mission. Commander Thale was an older Etherian with silver skin and deep blue eyes that showed the wisdom of centuries. He received Zara in his private office aboard the ship. "Dr. Kethvi," he said formally, "I understand you have discoveries to report about the human species." "Yes, Commander," Zara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But my findings are unusual. They concern not just human biology, but potentially important information about our own species as well." She explained her biological responses to observing humans, showing him the detailed scans and genetic analysis. She described how human bioelectric fields seemed to activate dormant Etherian DNA sequences. Commander Thale listened without interruption, his expression remaining perfectly neutral, as trained Etherian leaders were expected to maintain. "These are extraordinary claims, Dr. Kethvi," he said finally. "Are you suggesting that this primitive species possesses biological capabilities that we lack?" "I'm suggesting that they possess biological capabilities that we have suppressed," Zara corrected. "Our evolution toward perfect control may have eliminated important functions that humans have retained." The commander was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. "If your theory is correct," he said slowly, "it could mean that our entire understanding of evolutionary progress is flawed. It could suggest that maintaining primitive biological responses serves some purpose we don't understand." "Exactly," Zara said. "I believe humans represent a different evolutionary path than the one we chose. They combined advanced intelligence with maintained emotional and instinctive systems. This combination might make them more complete as a species than we realized. Commander Thale stood and walked to the window that showed Earth below. Dr. Kethvy, what you're describing could fundamentally change how our people view themselves and their place in the galaxy. Such knowledge would need to be handled very carefully. I understand, Commander, but I believe this discovery is too important to ignore. If humans can reawaken dormant capabilities in other species, they might be the key to helping the entire galaxy achieve a new level of evolutionary development. The commander turned back to face her. Continue your research, Doctor, but keep these findings strictly confidential until we understand their full implications. If humans truly possess this catalyst effect, they may be far more valuable to galactic civilization than anyone initially believed. As Zara left the commander's office, she felt a mixture of excitement and worry. She had opened a path toward revolutionary discoveries, but she also knew that such knowledge could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Tomorrow, she would begin more detailed studies of human biology and its effects on other species. She had a feeling that her research was about to reveal truths that would change the galaxy forever. 3 days into Dr. Zara Kethvy's expanded research, the peaceful scientific mission took a dangerous turn. The ship's alarm systems activated during the morning shift, filling the corridors with flashing red lights and warning sounds. Zara was in the middle of conducting detailed bioscans on a human volunteer named David Chen when the emergency began. David was a young engineer from Earth who had volunteered for the extended research program. Over the past few days, Zara had found herself looking forward to their daily sessions, more than any scientific work she had ever done. All personnel to emergency stations. Commander Thale's voice announced through the ship's communication system. We have detected 3 hostile vessels approaching our position. This is not a drill. Zara felt her newly awakened instincts respond with concern for David's safety. This protective feeling surprised her with its intensity. What's happening? David asked, his voice calm despite the obvious danger. Hostile ships, Zara explained. You need to get to the evacuation pods immediately. What about your research? David asked. And what about the other human volunteers on board? His immediate concern for others, even in a moment of personal danger, triggered more of those strange biological responses in Zara. She realized that humans consistently showed this pattern of putting group welfare ahead of individual safety. Dr. Kethvy to the bridge. Immediately came another announcement. Zara escorted David to the evacuation area, where the other human volunteers were being gathered by Etherian security personnel. As she hurried toward the bridge, she noticed that while her people moved with efficient calm, the humans showed a different kind of response to the crisis. The humans were asking questions, offering to help, and displaying emotional reactions that seemed to energize them rather than paralyze them. One human female, Dr. Sarah Martinez, was already working with Etherian technicians to analyze the approaching threat. On the bridge, Zara found Commander Thale studying tactical displays with his senior officers. The 3 approaching ships were clearly warships belonging to the Dominion Coalition, aggressive alliance of species that opposed peaceful exploration and contact with new civilizations. Dr. Kethvy, the commander said, the Dominion ships are demanding that we surrender the human subjects to them. They claim that humans represent a potential threat to galactic stability and must be contained. Zara felt a surge of anger that was completely foreign to her controlled Etherian nature. The idea of humans being harmed because of her research filled her with protective emotion she didn't know she possessed. Commander, humans are not a threat, she said. My research shows they could be beneficial to all species. The Dominion doesn't agree, replied Captain Vorth, the ship's military officer. Their intelligence suggests that humans have unusual psychological effects on other species. They want to study this phenomenon themselves, probably as a weapon. Through the bridge's main viewing screen, Zara could see the Dominion warships approaching. They were dark, angular vessels designed for combat rather than exploration. The sight of them filled her with dread for the safety of the human volunteers. Incoming transmission from the lead Dominion ship, announced the communications officer. A harsh voice filled the bridge. Etherian vessel, you will immediately transfer all human subjects to our custody. These creatures represent a dangerous biological influence that must be controlled. You have 1 hour to comply or we will take them by force. Commander Thale considered their options. The Eternal Light was a research vessel with minimal weapons. The 3 Dominion warships could easily overpower them in direct combat. "Commander," came David Chen's voice through the communication system. "This is David Chen speaking for the human volunteers. We understand the situation and want to help." "Mr. Chen," the commander replied, "you and your people should remain in the evacuation area for your own safety." "With respect." "Commander," David continued, "we didn't come here just to be passengers. We're engineers, scientists, and problem solvers. Let us contribute to finding a solution." Zara watched the conversation with growing amazement. Even faced with capture by hostile aliens, the humans were offering to help rather than demanding protection. "What do you propose?" Commander Thale asked. "Give us access to your ship's systems," David said. "Dr. Martinez has already identified some weaknesses in your defensive capabilities. We might be able to help you improve them quickly." Captain Vorth objected immediately. "Commander, we cannot give alien civilians access to our military systems." But Zara found herself speaking up. "Commander, I've been observing human problem-solving abilities for days. They approach challenges differently than we do. They might see solutions that we've missed." The commander made a decision that surprised everyone. "Mr. Chen, Dr. Martinez, report to engineering. You have 45 minutes to show us what human creativity can accomplish." What happened next amazed Zara and challenged everything she thought she knew about intelligence and capability. The humans didn't work like Etherians. Instead of careful methodical analysis, they engaged in rapid brainstorming sessions where they built on each other's ideas without regard for formal procedures. David and Dr. Martinez were joined by 2 other human volunteers, and together they attacked the problem from multiple angles simultaneously. Within 20 minutes, they had identified a way to modify the ship's deflector arrays to create a feedback loop in the Dominion ship's targeting systems. Within 30 minutes, they had figured out how to use the ship's research sensors as a communications jamming system. And in the final 15 minutes, they developed a plan that was so unconventional that no Etherian would have considered it. "Commander," Dr. Martinez reported, "we can't outfight them, but we can confuse them long enough to escape. The plan requires precise timing and some calculated risks, but we believe it will work." Zara watched as the humans explained their strategy. It involved using the research ship's scientific equipment in ways it was never designed for, creating multiple simultaneous diversions, and executing a series of maneuvers that required split-second coordination. The plan was chaotic, unpredictable, and completely contrary to standard military doctrine, but as Zara listened, she realized it was also brilliant. "The key," David explained, "is that they're expecting us to respond like typical military opponents. But we're not military and we're not typical. We use that as an advantage." Commander Thale approved the plan, and the entire ship began implementing the human strategy. As the final minutes ticked away before the Dominion deadline, Zara found herself working alongside David in the sensor control room. She watched him coordinate multiple complex systems with an intuitive understanding that seemed to combine knowledge, instinct, and pure creative energy. "How do you do this?" she asked him during a brief pause. "How do you solve problems so quickly without following established procedures?" David smiled at her, creating those now familiar pleasant sensations in her biology. "We don't separate our thinking from our feeling," he said. "We use both at the same time. Logic tells us what's possible, but emotion tells us what's important. When you combine them, you get solutions that pure logic alone can't find." The truth of his words hit Zara like a revelation. Her people had spent centuries perfecting their logical capabilities while suppressing their emotional responses. But humans had found a way to use both systems together, creating a form of intelligence that was more flexible and creative than either approach alone. The Dominion ships began their attack just as the human plan went into effect. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. Instead of engaging in direct combat, the Eternal Light became a ghost ship, appearing and disappearing from the Dominion sensors while launching a series of confusing signals and false readings. The research vessel seemed to be in 6 different places at once, transmitting contradictory data and creating sensor phantoms that led the warships on a frantic chase through empty space. By the time the Dominion commanders realized they had been deceived, the Eternal Light was already entering hyperspace with all crew and human volunteers safely aboard. As the ship escaped to safety, Zara looked at David with a new understanding. Humans weren't just triggering her dormant biological responses. They were demonstrating a completely different approach to existence that combined intelligence with emotion, logic with intuition, and knowledge with creativity. Dr. Kethvi, David said as they secured the sensor equipment, "I hope our little adventure didn't mess up your research too much." Zara realized that the adventure had actually provided more valuable data than weeks of controlled observations ever could have. She had seen humans under pressure, working together, solving problems, and maintaining their concern for others even in the face of personal danger. "Actually," she told him, "I think you've helped me understand the most important thing about your species. You've maintained something that the rest of us lost when we chose pure rationality over complete experience." As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Zara began to understand that her research was leading toward discoveries that would change not just scientific knowledge, but the entire future of galactic civilization. After their escape from the Dominion forces, the Eternal Light traveled to a secure research station in the neutral Vega system. Commander Thale had decided that Dr. Zara Kethavi's discoveries were too important to investigate without proper resources and protection. The station, called Deep Knowledge, was a massive facility built by multiple allied species for conducting sensitive research. Here, Zara would have access to genetic databases from dozens of different civilizations, along with the most advanced biological analysis equipment in the galaxy. But Zara's first priority was to understand what had happened during the crisis with the Dominion ships. The human volunteers had demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond what any previous analysis had suggested. She needed to document these abilities and understand their implications. "David," she said to the human engineer who had become her primary research subject, "I want to run some tests on your brain activity while you solve problems. The techniques you used during our escape showed patterns I've never seen before." David agreed, and Zara began a series of detailed neural scans. What she discovered challenged everything she thought she knew about intelligence and consciousness. When David worked on complex problems, his brain didn't function like an Etherian brain or any other species she had studied. Instead of processing information in orderly, sequential patterns, his neural activity showed chaotic but highly organized bursts of electrical energy that jumped between different brain regions in seemingly random ways. But the randomness was an illusion. When Zara analyzed the patterns more carefully, she found that David's brain was processing multiple streams of information simultaneously, combining logical analysis with emotional assessment, creative intuition, and pattern recognition all at the same time. "This is incredible," Zara told her research team. "Human brains operate like multiple specialized computers working together, but with constant communication between all systems. They're not just thinking about problems, they're feeling them, imagining them, and experiencing them from multiple perspectives simultaneously." Dr. Vex, her assistant, studied the neural scan data with amazement. "Dr. Kethvi, this explains why humans could solve our tactical problems so quickly. They weren't following standard analytical procedures. They were using a completely different form of intelligence." Zara nodded, but she suspected there was even more to discover. She requested permission to study the human effect on other species, and Commander Thale arranged for volunteers from several different alien races to participate in her research. The results were startling. When representatives from the crystalline hive observed humans, their normally rigid mental structures began showing more flexible thought patterns. The telepathic Zephyrians found that their empathic abilities became stronger and more precise around humans. Even the emotionally suppressed mechanoids began displaying signs of creative problem-solving that their programming wasn't designed to support. "Commander," Zara reported after 2 weeks of intensive testing, "humans aren't just awakening dormant genetics in my people. They're triggering evolutionary responses in every species we've tested. It's as if they carry some kind of biological catalyst that helps other forms of life unlock their full potential." Commander Thale reviewed her data with growing concern and excitement. "Dr. Kethvi, if your findings are accurate, humans may represent the most significant discovery in galactic history. But such knowledge could also be extremely dangerous in the wrong hands." Zara understood his concern. If humans could unlock hidden capabilities in other species, various governments and military organizations would want to study and possibly exploit this ability. "There's more, Commander," Zara continued. I've been analyzing data from the Galactic archives looking for similar phenomena in other species. I found something disturbing. She brought up a series of historical records on the main display screen. Over the past 5,000 years, dozens of advanced civilizations have reached a point of perfect biological control, similar to our own. But then, all of them experienced periods of stagnation and decline. They stopped innovating, stopped exploring, and eventually became extinct or fell into irreversible decay. Commander Thale studied the patterns with growing alarm. Are you suggesting that our evolutionary path leads to extinction? I'm suggesting that the pursuit of perfect rationality and biological control may be an evolutionary dead end, Zara replied. All of these civilizations followed the same pattern. They eliminated emotional responses, suppressed instinctive behaviors, and achieved complete logical control over their biology. And then they stopped growing as a species. The implications were staggering. If Zara was right, then the Etherian civilization was following a path that would eventually lead to their decline and extinction. But humans are different, she continued. They've achieved advanced intelligence while maintaining their emotional and instinctive systems. They represent a successful integration of rationality and feeling, logic and creativity, and their presence seems to help other species rediscover the capabilities they've lost. Dr. Vex had been analyzing additional data during their conversation. Dr. Kethvy, he said urgently, I found something else. According to the galactic databases, there have been 3 other species in recorded history that showed characteristics similar to humans. All of them were destroyed by coalitions of advanced civilizations who saw them as threats to galactic stability. The room fell silent as the full implications became clear. Humans weren't just unique in their biological capabilities. They were part of a pattern that had appeared before in galactic history. And each time, the established civilizations had eliminated them rather than learning from them. The Dominion Coalition, Commander Thale said slowly. They weren't trying to capture humans for study. They were trying to eliminate them before other species could be influenced by human capabilities. Zara felt a surge of protective anger that was now becoming familiar to her. The idea that humans might be destroyed because of their beneficial effects on other species seemed like a terrible injustice. Commander, we have to protect them, she said. Humans could be the key to preventing the cycle of civilizational decline that has affected so many species. They could help all of us rediscover our full evolutionary potential. Commander Thale made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Dr. Kethvy, I'm authorizing you to expand your research into a full-scale project. But we're not just going to study humans. We're going to learn from them. And we're going to share that knowledge with every species willing to listen. Over the following days, Zara worked with the human volunteers to document their problem-solving techniques, their emotional integration methods, and their approaches to creativity and innovation. David Chen and Dr. Sarah Martinez became her primary teachers, helping her understand how to combine logical analysis with intuitive understanding. The process was transformative for Zara personally. As she learned to integrate her newly awakened emotional responses with her scientific training, she found herself becoming more creative, more insightful, and more effective in her research. It's not about choosing between logic and emotion, Dr. Martinez explained during one of their sessions. It's about using them together. Emotion tells you what's important, logic tells you what's possible, and creativity helps you find new connections between them. As word of the research spread through the neutral systems, other species began requesting access to the human volunteers and the techniques they were developing. The crystalline hive sent representatives to learn how emotional integration could improve their collective decision-making. The Zephyrians wanted to understand how humans maintained individual identity while cooperating effectively. Even some mechanoid units requested programming updates based on human cognitive patterns. But Zara also received warnings that the Dominion Coalition was organizing a larger military response to what they called the human contamination. Other established civilizations were beginning to view humans as a biological weapon that threatened their carefully controlled social systems. We're at a turning point, Zara told Commander Thale as they reviewed intelligence reports about growing opposition to their research. Either humans will help transform galactic civilization for the better, or they'll be destroyed by civilizations too rigid to accept change. Commander Thale looked out at the stars surrounding their research station. Then we need to move quickly, Dr. Kethvy. If humans truly represent the next step in evolution for all species, we need to spread that knowledge before anyone can stop us. Zara understood that her research had evolved from a scientific study into something much larger. She was now part of a movement that could either revolutionize galactic civilization or trigger a war that would determine the future of intelligent life in the galaxy. The next phase of her work would require courage, wisdom, and the kind of creative problem-solving that humans had taught her to embrace. As she prepared for the challenges ahead, Zara felt grateful for the biological awakening that had started with her first glimpse of a human being. She was no longer just studying humans. She was becoming something new herself, something that combined the best of Etherian logic with the emotional and creative capabilities that humans had never lost. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when different forms of intelligence learn. 6 months after Dr. Zara Kethvy's first encounter with humans, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The research station Deep Knowledge had become the center of what historians would later call the Great Awakening, a transformation that spread from species to species across the civilized worlds. Zara stood in the main conference hall of the station, looking out at an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from 47 different species had come to learn about human integration techniques and the biological awakening they offered. The hall buzzed with a mixture of languages, thought patterns, and communication methods that would have been impossible before humans taught them how to blend different approaches to consciousness. Dr. Kethvy, said Ambassador Kylan from the Crystalline Hive, our collective has voted to officially request human advisors for our next expansion phase. The creativity protocols they taught us have increased our efficiency by 300%. Nearby, Commander Vorth of the Mechanoid Assembly added, our units have integrated human-inspired emotional subroutines into their base programming. Logic combined with purposeful feeling has made our people more effective and more satisfied with their existence. Zara smiled, an expression that had become natural to her over the past months. The changes in her own biology had stabilized into a new kind of consciousness that combined Etherian intellectual precision with human emotional depth and creativity. She had become a bridge between two different evolutionary paths. The integration process continues to exceed our projections, she reported to the assembly. Humans don't just awaken dormant capabilities in other species. They teach sustainable methods for maintaining the balance between rational analysis and emotional understanding. David Chen, who had become the unofficial human ambassador to the galactic community, stepped up to address the gathering. Over the months, he had learned to work with dozens of different alien species, helping each find their own path toward integrated consciousness. Friends, David said, using the simple word that had become a galactic standard for positive interspecies relationships, we're not here to change who you are. We're here to help you become who you were meant to be before evolution forced you to choose between thinking and feeling. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. The Dominion Coalition had indeed organized military resistance to what they called biological contamination. 3 major battles had been fought in different sectors of the galaxy, as traditionalist civilizations tried to prevent the spread of human influence. But the results of those conflicts had surprised everyone. The species that had learned human integration techniques didn't just fight more effectively, they fought more wisely. Instead of seeking to destroy their opponents, they found ways to neutralize threats while offering alternatives to violence. The war had ended not with conquest, but with conversion. Even some Dominion species had requested access to human teachers after seeing the advantages of integrated consciousness in both conflict and cooperation. Dr. Kethvy called Dr. Sarah Martinez from across the hall. The latest reports from the frontier sectors are remarkable. The Spiral Alliance has successfully negotiated peace with the Void Hunters using conflict resolution techniques based on human emotional intelligence. Zara nodded with satisfaction. The Void Hunters were one of the most aggressive species in the galaxy, known for their inability to communicate peacefully with other civilizations. But human negotiators had found ways to address the underlying emotional needs that drove their aggression, creating the first successful diplomatic contact in centuries. As the day's meetings continued, Zara reflected on how dramatically her own life had changed. The biological responses that had begun with her first glimpse of a human had evolved into something much deeper and more meaningful. She had not only awakened dormant capabilities in her own genetics, but had learned to integrate them with her scientific training in ways that made her more effective than she had ever been before. More importantly, she had discovered that the pleasant sensations she felt around humans weren't just biological attraction. They were her mind and body recognizing the potential for growth and partnership that humans represented. That evening, Zara walked through the station's observation deck with David. They had developed a close working relationship that combined professional collaboration with personal friendship. For Zara, this was entirely new, as Etherians traditionally maintained strict separation between professional and personal connections. "David," she said, as they looked out at the stars, "do you think we're really changing the galaxy? Or are we just going back to something that existed before?" David considered the question carefully. "I think we're doing both," he said. "The capacity for integrated consciousness exists in all intelligent species. But somewhere along the path of civilization, most species were convinced that they had to choose between logic and emotion, between individual achievement and group cooperation, between stability and growth." He gestured toward the busy stations and ships visible outside the observation windows. "What we're seeing now isn't humans changing other species. We're seeing other species rediscovering abilities they always had but were taught to suppress." Zara understood the truth of his words. Her own experience proved that Etherians had maintained the genetic capacity for emotional integration. Even after centuries of suppressing it, humans hadn't given her anything new. They had simply helped her access what was already within her biology. "But why didn't other species figure this out on their own?" she asked. "Because integration is hard," David replied. "It's easier to choose one extreme or the other. Pure logic feels safe and controllable. Pure emotion feels natural and instinctive. But combining them requires constant balance and adjustment. It's messy and unpredictable. And humans never lost the ability to handle that messiness," Zara observed. "We never lost it because we never had the option to eliminate it," David said with a laugh. "Human biology wouldn't let us suppress our emotions completely, even when some of our philosophers thought that would be a good idea. We were forced to learn how to live with the complexity." As they talked, Zara realized that humans represented something unique in galactic evolution. They were the first species to reach advanced technological capability while maintaining full biological integration. This combination made them naturally suited to help other species avoid the evolutionary dead ends that had claimed so many civilizations. Dr. Kethvy came an announcement through the station's communication system. "You have an urgent message from the Galactic Council." Zara and David hurried to the communication center, where they found Commander Thale waiting with an expression of controlled excitement. "Dr. Kethvy," he said, "the Galactic Council has voted to establish the Integration Institute, a permanent organization dedicated to helping species develop sustainable combinations of rational and emotional capabilities. They want you to serve as the first director." The offer was unprecedented. No single individual had ever been given authority to work with so many different species on such a fundamental level. But Zara realized that her unique experience, having undergone biological awakening herself while maintaining her scientific training, made her the logical choice for the position. "I accept," she said, "but with one condition. The Institute must be jointly directed by both human and non-human consciousness." "David, will you serve as co-director?" David looked surprised but pleased. "I'd be honored to work with you on this, Zara. But are you sure the Council will accept joint human leadership?" Commander Thale smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for him before learning human integration techniques. "Actually, Dr. Kethvy, that was their suggestion. The Council has come to understand that effective integration requires cooperation between different forms of consciousness." Over the following weeks, Zara and David worked together to establish the Integration Institute on a scale that spanned multiple star systems. They developed training programs for dozens of species, created research protocols for studying consciousness integration, and established diplomatic frameworks for peaceful cooperation between civilizations. With different evolutionary backgrounds, the Institute's first major success came when they helped resolve a conflict between the hive minds of Sector 7 and the individual collective of the Perseus. The two groups had been locked in a philosophical war for centuries. each convinced that their approach to consciousness was superior. Human-inspired integration techniques helped both sides understand that collective and individual awareness could coexist and strengthen each other. Zara watched the former enemies working together on joint projects. She reflected on how much her understanding of consciousness and evolution had expanded since her first observation of a human being. The biological attraction she had initially felt toward humans had evolved into something much deeper, a recognition of the potential for growth and partnership that came from combining different approaches to intelligence and awareness. "You know," she told David as they reviewed the latest integration success reports. "I think the most important thing humans have taught the galaxy isn't any specific